Hello and welcome to this extra episode of The Old Shop. It's May's Eve or Beltane Eve, and on a whim, it's such a lovely day, I thought I would make an extra little episode just to celebrate the beauty of the spring, really. I'm really sorry, I'll say this now, the sound quality isn't what I would really like on the bit I've already done and edited, which is a tour around this garden, but because I did it spontaneously, I don't really want to do it again. I kind of said what I wanted to say in that, so I hope you'll forgive the sound quality and I hope you'll be able to hear it well enough. And apart from that, we've got some stuff about natural dyeing and a little visit down to the bluebells in the woods, and of course there are some images. Well, I shot them all this morning actually, of the beautiful buds unfurling down in the woods. I could have spent hours down there. There's just so much wonder and delight as you see things today that weren't there yesterday. So I hope you'll enjoy that as well. And of course we always have to have a look at the bindweed, but you never know, next time it might have all magically disappeared, or I might have had some kind of magic wand waved over it. I think that the word May's Eve is so evocative, and I know a lot of people like to call it Beltane, but Beltane Eve is evocative as well. So whatever you like to call this festival, or however you celebrate it, or however you just feel it without celebrating it in any kind of formal sense, just feel the spring rising. I send you and wish you every blessing from here at the Old Shop. If you saw the last video, you might remember that I was doing some dyeing using gorse from the heath, and on Easter Sunday that's the day I actually dyed the material that I had prepared and hung it on the line in beautiful sunshine on Easter Sunday. And that was the beginning of a new project, which I haven't talked about yet as such, but I will do as the spring progresses. But it's something where every festival date I want to dye another piece of material and use something, a plant which is relevant to that season. Anyway, so for May's Eve, I wondered what I wanted to use, and I thought, what are we seeing a lot of? What energy is really strong at the moment? And of course, lots of energy is really strong, but one very good dye plant is nettle. To begin with, I thought I need to go out into the wild somewhere and collect nettles from a resonant location, and then I thought, no, actually for the concept I'm thinking of, I think I'd like to take them from the garden. And this is the end of the garden. Everything has gone completely mad, and that's completely already out of control on May's Eve. It's not even May till tomorrow, but this is a sea of nettles, and I just think it's indicative, if that's the right word, of the idea of wildness. You know, in our own garden, in our own garden, which is our own heart or our own soul, there's this wildness that wants to break free. So that seems perfect for Beltane, May, you know, all those wild energies. And so that's why I actually thought the most logical, conceptually, place to get nettles from was the garden. So that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to put some gloves on, and you can see how strongly they're growing, and also you can see how much they probably would prickle if you were to try and pick them with your bare hands, which I shall not be doing. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to make some dye, and I'll show you how they look in the pan in the kitchen when I get them simmering. I always wonder if it's such a good idea to give you a garden tour and if you'll be appalled, but at the same time I actually think it's quite important to really see in real life what happens to a garden if it can just do its own thing. I know this garden has always been really keen to grow because the old original owners, well, not the original owners, but because they would be a bit old by now, but the people who lived here before I did, one day I came home to find these two women standing outside the gate, and one of them was the old owner, and she was back in Norfolk, and she had come to have a little look over the gate at what it was like now. Anyway, we had a good chat, and she told me that one of the reasons they decided they couldn't keep the cottage up, this was their second home. They lived in Cambridge, but they used to come here for holidays and weekends and so on, is that the garden, they could never keep it on top of the garden. It was just, they'd never known a garden that had so many, well, what she called weeds. And you can see exactly what she meant, in that it really does want to grow, even though I haven't been encouraging any plants. When I've planted the trees, I've put manure or compost in the holes, and that's all. So everything else is just what's happened by itself. Anyway, I thought I would show you, as I think I said last time, we'd have a tour of the back garden as well. I haven't done any work out here, which I know I always say as well, apart from a few weeks ago I did clear a path down the middle between the two sections of trees, which has now grown over quite a lot, but you can still see where it was, which is good. So I'm just going to show you it just as it is, because that's what I thought I would do, and then over the next few weeks you'll see how I'm not going to say I'll tame it, because that's not really my aim, and you'd fail if you wanted to do that anyway. But I'm just going to do certain things, and one of the things I definitely want to do is to take out thistles, because thistles are really difficult to walk through. They're really treacherous, more so than nettles really, because well, probably not more so than nettles, but at least with nettles I can cut them down and use them in compost. So let's start here. Just like I said with the front garden, I won't go through every single plant, but just the things that are really standing out at the moment. This is the herb bed, and because the herbs are planted quite closely, it basically mostly is herbs in this bed, and other plants haven't had a chance to muscle in quite like as they have elsewhere. So that's some lovely bronze fennel, really strongly growing. Just, I don't know what it is with this soil, but it just really, everything just really wants to grow. All these plants you can see in between are Angelica, which seizes itself, and that will of course have to come out, because that makes a 6 foot tall plant, and there just isn't space for all these little babies. But in the meantime, it's nice to see them there. Nice, they're covering the earth. And we've got some other herbs here, like the rosemary, rue, and this is white horehound, which is one of my favourites. We'll have to start working out how I can use it. It's one of my favourites for other reasons than its medicinal purposes, but it does have those. You can make a cough remedy, for example, using it. And hyssop, which is another favourite. It's going to have lovely flowers on it later, but that's partly the ancient associations of hyssop in the Bible and other old writings. It's always seen as a sacred herb and used for sprinkling water from, that kind of thing. The apple tree. And there's some fruit bushes here as well. There's a little tree which is not come through, unfortunately, so I'm going to be replacing that, but I have got some trees I haven't planted yet, so which I should have done, but I shall be doing this. One of the things I can do fairly easily. This is a fig tree, and it's really lovely to see that it's getting its leaves again. Looks as if it might need a little bit of water perhaps, because it's strange, it's been quite dry. It's really odd weather. It's been dry yet it's been wet, but I think things in containers anyway need more attention water wise. all I'm showing you here is bindweed, really. Bindweed, growing up bindweed. And this is all ready, so heaven help us. But, you know, what can I say? I should be doing my best to just make sure it doesn't actually strangle plants this year in the way it did last year. I don't really know why I'm showing you all this. And there's also these poppies that are a bit thug-like as well. Anyway, but between all that, we've got things like currant bushes here. And there's lots of fruit actually in between, which is one of the reasons I'm going to be as careful as I can to make sure that I don't lose it through not disentangling the bindweed from it. Because, because part of the rationale of the garden itself is to be growing food. So, well, I don't want to go mad in terms of prioritising food production over everything, so that I would net fruit from birds and so on. I don't want to do that. I'm going to share my food with the wildlife. But at the same time, there are little things you can do, like making sure the bindweed doesn't knock it all to the floor, which it would do. It's so strong. Here is I can't remember what it is, but it's something like a tayberry, something like that, something like a kind of cross between a raspberry and a blackberry. I think one of those, or loganberry, one of those kinds of fruits. And rhubarb, which is one of at least two rhubarb clumps in the garden, and this is ready to pull, which is really good. Last year it was only just starting. This year it's actually formed a really strongly growing clump. And there's an apple tree next to it, which is lovely to see, and another apple tree just here. It's really easy at the moment to see where the fruit trees are, because they are all in blossom. Talking of which, we'll just have a look at these here as well. This one needs a staking, really. I put a cane in, which isn't really good enough. Aspen's pearmain, and that's called the Reverend W. Wilkes one over there. So you know what some of them are. Not all of them I'm vague about, just a lot of them. So I think what we'll do, there's lots of comfrey as well, which I put some of it in, but I think it's self-seeded. But this is so good for compost, and it's so pretty as well. So certain wild plants I'm really happy to see anyway, and we'll be encouraging them rather than discouraging them. And the archaeologists, which really are one of my very favourite plants in the world. I think we had a video all about them last year, and they're coming into their own. Well, they're not coming into their own in terms of flowering yet, but you can see how strongly they're growing, and it'll be a matter of weeks, sometime during May. There'll be a lovely, lovely, lovely sight when they all flower in different hues, and you never know quite until they get further into bud what colour they're going to be. I absolutely love them, and I shall share it with you, of course. Now, here we're coming to the path. I know it's a bit of a joke, because this is also the path around the edge of the garden and you can't see it at all. I'm going to have to learn how to strim, basically. I have got a little strimmer. I'm a bit scared of it, but I don't really see any other way. I'm not going to get through otherwise very soon. But that's for another day. So we're just going to walk down the path between the trees here. So you can, because also we'll get some different views of the little forest as well. This is the path I cleared. I think I might have to move this tree here, which is a little bit in the path, but in general there is actually a little way through, so that you can see on this side there's one kind of swathe of trees. This is a Gelder rose, I think. Is it? I'm not sure actually. I'll wait and see. No, I don't think it is. I'm not sure what it is. Maybe it's one of these wild fruit bushes. I put in some little tiny plants that were wild fruits, like well, not necessarily wild. Not wild in this country, but would be wild where they come from. So Saskatoon, I think one sort is called, and thimbleberry. Can't remember, but I like that. I don't need to know. I think it's just interesting to see what happens. And these are hazels. I've got quite a few hazel trees. Didn't have any nuts last year, but I didn't really see nuts anywhere last year. I think it was one of those years that wasn't very good for hazelnuts. Every year is really fantastic for some fruits and wildflowers, and others for some reason don't really come forward in that year. And I think it wasn't a very hazelnutty year last year. But it was a very good chestnut year last year, and acorn year. Amazing. What they call a mast year, when there were extras. Another apple tree. This one's only just coming out, so it's obviously a later variety. I didn't even find this one last year because it was so densely hidden in the forest. I'm going to try and do a bit better this year by having this path kept open, which I'm going to put some cardboard down here. I'll just turn around so you can see what I'm saying, really. So I'm going to put some cardboard all the way along here and some wood chip, and just try and actually keep this as a path, whatever happens elsewhere, and then just dig out or trowel out where I come across thistles like that, where I can reach them. So that's my plan. But as you can probably also see, there are some fantastic wild plants that have just appeared, like daisies and ground ivy, which is that little purpley flower, celandines here, bluebells here. They have just literally all come by themselves. What else can I show you that's arrived by itself? Well, the periwinkles haven't arrived by themselves, in that I brought a couple of little strands from the woods, from Acorn Wood, like here, and it's as periwinkle tends to do, it takes over. But I don't mind. I mean, I don't know whether I'll mind or not longer term, but at the moment I don't mind, because it's much better to have the ground covered than bare, and it doesn't seem to get in the way of anything else, and it's not prickly, and it's pretty. So that seems good enough to me for the moment. We'll see. I say these things, and then we discover something we didn't realise, that it was going to be a problem with it later on, but I think it'll be okay. This is a wayfaring tree, which is a kind of viburnum. There's one in the front garden, which is actually grown bigger and taller there for whatever reason. And there's a few wild cherries, which are big trees. They're not cherries that you can eat. Well, maybe you could do, but I don't think they'd be very nice. They'd be quite small and hard and not sweet. But I planted them because you could get a bundle of 5 for about £10, and they were very good for birds and my idea, or wildlife in general. And my idea was that if the birds eat these, they may not be so keen on eating the fruits I want to eat. But whether that works out, I don't know. And also, they're quite big trees, and there's quite a few of them. So I'm not in one of these types of tree, which I'm not totally sure about. On reflection, I very keenly put loads of trees in a couple of years ago, the winter, that I suppose 2 years and about 3 months ago, believe it or not. That's all. And look at them. But some of them, I think I always knew that I'd have to work out which ones could stay, and whether some of them would have to make space for other things, you know. But the birch trees, there are 5 birch trees, and I planted them in a circle, so they were always intended to form a circle. Whether I planted them too close together is another matter, but I'm just going to step into the circle here. And I think probably the answer is yes, I probably did. But when they're little tiny sticks, it's really tempting to put them too close together. I think what they'll do is they'll just grow into almost like a single tree. All the branches will entwine, which might be quite nice anyway. It's all an experiment. It really is all an experiment. I'm very experienced in, I've been growing vegetables since I was 18, when I first had a house, so, which is a long time ago. So I feel like I'm fairly experienced in vegetable growing, but I'm certainly not experienced as the custodian of a tiny forest, or really in permaculture. I'm just learning things as I go with permaculture principles, and how far you let things be wild, how far you actually do have to manage them. There's some lovely cow parsley, I assume it's cow parsley rather than hogweed there. Not sure, because there are lots of similar umbellifers, but it's not, whatever it is, it's not doing any harm there. This is a wild pear tree, which again hasn't got fruit that you would eat, and I planted it for the same reason that I actually had 5 of them, and that I wanted to make sure there was plenty of trees that would be good for wildlife for lots of other reasons, including the fact that they would be good for pollinators, but also that eating the wild fruits might perhaps deter the birds from eating the cultivated fruits, although I'm not at all convinced it works that way. But the mistake I made by putting in these wild pear trees is that they have these really treacherous spines, and I've actually taken out 4 of the 5 trees because they're just a menace, really. Bless them. But this one I didn't have the heart to take out, and its trunk has actually made a proper tree trunk already. And say these are only a couple of years old, these trees, and they were just sticks when I put them in. But when I was taking out the other trees, this one had got beautiful blossom on it, and I just couldn't really bring myself to get rid of it. It's a lovely shape as well. So here it stays, and I'm just going to have to be careful, I think. It's just on the edge of the vegetable beds, so I think we'll just see. Like everything else, we'll just see what happens. Plants just want to go in every corner. That's foxgloves and nettles coming up there just between the edge of the concrete and the old outbuilding, and that's the same story everywhere. They even grow out of the walls themselves in some places. And here's a plant growing out of the wall. I think that is a foxglove. I think it is. Anyway, obviously it isn't going to turn into a foxglove just there, but it's such an amazing thing to see it actually trying to do so. And this is lemon balm that always wants to grow everywhere. It should smell really nice when I pinch it. Yeah, it does. I always wish I could share that with you. It was the same with the water mint in the little pond at the front. I say yesterday. Last time we had a video was the same. It was so lovely to smell. But you can use it, of course, in salads and in summer drinks, and you can put a sprig of mint and a sprig of lemon balm in a teapot and make a really nice herbal tea. It's sort of very light and refreshing and summery. Leaves just rustling in the birches, and some of the blossom just on the cusp. Is that in focus? Roughly so. On the cusp of coming out like this, and all that new hope that it symbolises when it comes to fruition as beautiful apples. I filled this bowl with nettles. I don't know if you can get an idea of the size of it, and mounded them up, but I've also snipped them up as I went so that they don't take up quite, you can get more into the bowl. I don't really know, there's no particular quantity you need, but that should be enough. If you think of a saucepan or a large pan, that will kind of fill it up before the water goes in. This is a piece of old white sheeting. It's been washed lots and lots of times, so it's very soft. And the first thing to do when you've got your material, or found some material, if it's already been washed lots of times like this, you haven't got to go through the process called scouring, which is washing it at a really high temperature. So I'm able to bypass that. So I'll just take you from this stage here, assuming that you've got some old material that you can use. So what I did was I took a piece of, quite a large piece, and I weighed it dry, and you need to make a note of how much it weighs, ready for another stage later on. Then you soak it in water, which is what I'm doing here, overnight. So that's the stage I'm at now with the material. So everything's going to come together tomorrow on May Day. We've reached the stream and the alder car. This is the other, what I call the other side of the stream here. And the bluebells aren't yet out to their full extent. You can see across on the other side here, you've got the wild garlic flowers as well. And just that little haze of blue, but they will open up a little bit more than this, I think. And you've got just the odd pink one as well, which is always interesting. I never quite know why that happens. In fact, there's even a few white ones. Look at that. I don't know if I've I'm not sure if I've seen white ones before, like in the wild like this. There's certainly nobody's planted them. They're just naturally occurring, and they are the native ones, not the Spanish ones that have a more upright, strong upright habit. If they bend their heads over like this, they are the native ones. Anyway, there's actually quite a few pink ones. Anyway, what I thought was that we'd come round here to the watery bit with the alder trees, and I'll show you something that I found in my mum's garage while clearing. Oops, standing on a twig. It's dried up quite a lot, the water. We have had some dry weather. I'm trying not to stand on the bluebells as best I can. And this is quite a nice place to sit. So I'm going to sit down just by the tree roots here. It's dry enough. I know it's not totally dry, but it's dry enough to sit for a few minutes. And here it is. It's a little flute or penny whistle that I found, as I say, in my mum's garage, just, well, among other bits and pieces. I brought it home and I gave it a little bit of oil just to nourish the wood. You can see how it's been beautifully decorated with pyrography at one point. I don't know where it came from or anything. I don't remember. I vaguely remember it from my childhood, where we had lots of musical instruments that we would play, you know, like little, I don't know, tambourines or maracas and things. And I think it was one of those, and xylophones. But anyway, it had been put aside a long, long time ago, and I brought it home. And what I've discovered is that even if you don't know what you're doing, and I can play the recorder a little bit, but I mean, I'm not trying to pick out real tunes, because it's not quite the same as a recorder. It hasn't got a hole on the back, so you haven't got that range of possible notes. So what I found was I took it out with me, and I found that you could just let the instrument play itself. I just didn't really, I tried not to think too much where my fingers were going, and I found it played a little tune. So I thought I'd have a go at that now, as it's May's Eve. I thought perhaps the fair folk would be out and about and might lend a hand and put a tune into my flute. So see what you think. I'm going to give it a go now. The nettles simmered for about an hour, and then I've just left them overnight in the pan with the water to steep, and that's what they look like now. It's really hard to say how much dye stuff will come out of them, but nettles are a really good dye, so I'm very hopeful. So that will just sit there till I'm ready to use it. And on the other side here, I've got the material is actually mordanting at the moment in alum. I choose to use alum. There, I think I can't remember whether I've mentioned this before, but there are various things you can do and try. But I plumped for this. Although it is a chemical alum, it's aluminium, but as chemicals go, it's a very benign one. In fact, you can put the water on the garden afterwards, for example, so it can't be too bad. And people, of course, use aluminium pans, aluminium foil, and so on. I mean, I wouldn't drink it or anything like that, obviously, but I'm very careful with it. But I prefer to use alum because it gives a really good light fast result. But it doesn't brighten the colours too much. You can use soya milk, that's a different process altogether, which I haven't explored in depth, but that gives brighter colours. So it just depends on what you want, really. There's lots of resources about it online. I'm just showing you what I do. And I also like to use cotton or linen because it gives more subtle shades than wool or silk, which are animal fibres, and they give brighter results. So yeah, it all depends on what you're looking for. The book that I found very useful is called The Wild Dyer by Abigail Booth, and I will link that in at the bottom in the caption, because basically my method is based on hers. So what I've done is I've put the material into the simmering water, and I've added in alum. The proportion of alum is 5%. So for I had 230 grams of dry material, so you would multiply that by you divide it by 100 and then multiply by 5, which sounds difficult, but you can round it up or down slightly. And I ended up with 10 grams of alum, which I dissolved in boiling water and then added to the pan and then added the material. And that has to just stay just below boiling point, or it can just simmer lightly for about an hour. And then you're meant to leave it overnight to steep. I'm not sure whether I'm going to leave it overnight. I might just leave it for several hours, because I think that will be fine as well, and come back to it later this afternoon, and then we'll see what happens next. I rinsed the material when this had been steeping in the mordant for several hours, anyway, most of the day, and it was cold, so I took it out, gave it a little rinse, and strained the water the nettles had been simmering in, which is now the dye bath, and it's simmering again with fabric in there. So you're not supposed to let it actually boil, but just keep it just at simmering or just under simmering point, so it stays hot. You can see the steam rising, so it's hot enough, I think. Every so often you want to keep turning the material so that you don't get folds in it, and so that it dyes more evenly. And I've got these, I found these actually, I think they're barbecue tongs, but they work quite well for turning it. Not all the time, but every so often, if you just kind of lift it up like this and turn the material over to make sure it's all gets submerged, and that you don't get too many creases and lines running through it when it's finished. Although you always get some unevenness, I find. I don't mind that because it shows it is actually hand dyed. So so probably after another 10 minutes or so, I'll turn it again, and let's let it keep doing what it's doing for maybe a little bit stronger than this. I might turn the heat up a little tiny bit, but you don't want it to really bubble. And after about an hour, then you can put the lid on and leave it overnight again, or as long as, you can leave it for longer if you like, and you might get a stronger colour that way. But I think I shall leave it overnight because it won't dry now anyway, because it's coming to evening. So I'll leave it overnight to steep, and then in the morning I'll put it out on the line and let it dry. And you rinse it before you put it on the line and let it dry, and then you could iron it. I won't be ironing mine straight away, but that would be the final stage. And I don't know, that might actually help it to set the colour even more by ironing, because I don't know whether it does or not. Some processes, heat setting is good. It's looking quite yellow at the moment, like the gorse did, or a little bit more subdued than the colour of the gorse. But it may end up a greenish kind of hue, which is what I've known nettle to do before.